look at that face. This is Predator's car, and it's waiting for you to screw up so that it can rip open your crappy car's fuel tank, feast on its unleaded blood, and then move on to its next victim. As you can see then, the Lexus RC F is here to bring down the German establishment in a blaze of V8 glory and burning rubber. Now the good news is that the RC F is the first properly exciting Lexus that we've had since 2012. You know what happened in 2012. Lexus stopped production of the amazing V10 powered LFA. Now speaking of that car, let's just cut to this. Oh yes, that's a good noise. That is a very, very good noise. This 5-litre V8 produces 471 brake horsepower. That translates to a 0 to 62 time of 4.5 seconds and a top speed limited to 168. Now one of the negatives about the RCF is torque. There isn't enough of it. Sure, it's got a 5-litre V8, but low down, when you want more power, it's just not quite there. In an M4 with its 3-litre turbocharged straight 6 engine, the power delivery is definitely a lot more immediate. Only when you get to about 4,500–5,000 RPM, that's when the V8 really sings. Another thing that isn't quite perfect on this car is the gearbox. Sure, it's an 8-speeder, it's really smooth, but it does not change down gears quickly enough. If I were in 8th gear just cruising along at 50 miles an hour and I saw a lorry, if I wanted to overtake, I would hit the paddles 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I would go from 8th into 3rd. Now I've timed it, and that transition takes 5 seconds. When you're traveling at 50, 5 seconds is too damn long. If you thought the outside looked hot, get a load of this interior. It's kitted out with leather, sexy angles, and a pair of seats that should come with a not safe for work warning. I mean, just look at them. If only the same attention was paid to the bland and plasticky centre console. Anyway, moving on. With massive V8 firepower, noise is always going to be a talking point for all the right reasons. You can hear a V8 coming a mile off, and although the RCF's engine and exhaust noise is a lot more refined than proper American muscle cars, it still sounds pretty awesome. It's the same engine that you'll find in the ISF saloon, except for 2 things. One, the rev limiter has been upped from 6,800 to 7,300 RPM, and 2, power is also up by 12%. We're now packing 471 brake horsepower. But that's not the only special thing about this engine. You see, it's got this thing called Atkinson and Otto cycle, and what that means is I have absolutely no idea. So instead of wasting your time, I'm just going to close this and hand you over to my buddy, Engineering Explained.
Hello Car Throttle. As you've already gathered, Alex isn't quite the sharpest tool in the box. However, he does know someone who's mediocre at searching on Google. So let's talk about how this Lexus uses 2 different engine cycles, one for creating more power and one for being more fuel efficient. So when it wants to create more power, it'll be operating under the Otto cycle. And this is just like most of the engines out there on the road, where they have 4 strokes: intake, compression, power, exhaust. And the key thing to take away here is that the compression ratio, the volume of air before compression divided by the volume of air after compression, is equal to the expansion ratio, which is the volume of air after your power stroke divided by the volume of air after compression. Now, using cam phasing, the Lexus can switch over to the Atkinson cycle to operate more efficiently during low engine load operations, such as cruising down the highway. So let's talk about how it's actually different. Now, during the compression stroke, the intake valve is actually left open for a portion of it, so you push some of that air-fuel mixture back out. And what this does is it gives you a relatively smaller compression ratio in comparison to your expansion ratio. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, during your power stroke of the Otto cycle, once your piston hits bottom dead center, there's still additional pressure remaining, which is then lost out the exhaust. During the Atkinson cycle, you can recover some of this pressure because once your piston reaches what will be the equivalent of your compression ratio, it still has further to move, and you're turning more of that pressure into useful work, and therefore it's more efficient and will give you better fuel economy. Back over to you, Alex.
Now, even though it doesn't really make that much sense to a simpleton like me, I kind of get how the engine is supposed to be more fuel efficient with the strokes and the whatever. All I know is it makes an awesome noise. Yes! Driving the RC F gives you a real sense of satisfaction. Sure, the gearbox could be faster, and okay, this thing does cost £60,000, but you're getting something very special. It's a great cruiser, for example, features quick handling and strong brakes for fast cornering, and has insane amounts of grip. Until you turn the traction control off. What I really like about the RC F is that it properly flatters the driver. It's extremely forgiving, and it's also a lot of fun. I guess a good way to differentiate the RC F and the M4 is, and I said this in my review, that the M4 needs a properly experienced pair of hands to drive it extremely fast on a track. This, you could put a gorilla like me behind the wheel and I'll be getting similar lap times. And that is because there's loads of grip, there is plenty of grunt, especially top end. And that torque vectoring system, it really works wonders through the bends. If you've got it in slalom on a nice and tight twisty track, you'll be pushed to pull away from me in your M4. For day-to-day driving and for pure V8 pleasure, it's got to be the RC F. If you're in the market for something like this, go for a test drive. Drive this after the M4, drive this after the C63, and I think you'll be very pleasantly surprised.